their traps in the water, so that when the beavers roamed about at night they put their feet into them, and were caught and drowned; for although they can swim and dive admirably, they cannot live altogether under water. Thus the different parties proceeded, and in the mornings the camp was a busy scene indeed, for then the whole were engaged in skinning the animals. The beavers thus taken were always skinned, stretched, dried, folded up with the hair in the inside, laid by, and the flesh used for food. But oftentimes the trappers had to go forth with the gun in one hand and their traps in the other, while they kept a sharp lookout on the bushes to guard against surprise. Despite their utmost efforts, a horse was occasionally stolen before their very eyes, and sometimes even an unfortunate trapper was murdered and all his traps carried off. An event of this kind occurred soon after the party had gained the western slopes of the mountains. 3 Iroquois Indians, who belonged to the band of trappers, were sent to a stream about 10 miles off. Having reached their destination, they all entered the water to set their traps, foolishly neglecting the usual precaution of one remaining on the bank to protect the others. They had scarcely commenced operations when 3 arrows were discharged into their backs, and a party of Snake Indians rushed upon and slew them, carrying away their traps and horses and scalps. This was not known for several days, when, becoming anxious about their prolonged absence, Cameron sent out a party which found their mangled bodies affording a loathsome banquet to the wolves and vultures. After this sad event the trappers were more careful to go in larger parties and keep watch. As long as the beaver were taken in abundance the camp remained stationary, but whenever the beaver began to grow scarce the camp was raised and the party moved on to another valley. One day Dick Varley came galloping into the camp with the news that there were several bears in a valley not far distant, which he was anxious not to disturb until a number of the trappers were collected together to go out and surround them. On receiving the information, Walter Cameron shook his head.
"We have other things to do, young man," said he, "than go a-hunting after bears. I'm just about making up my mind to send off a party to search out the valley on the other side of the Blue Mountains yonder, and bring back word if there are beaver there; for if not, I mean to strike away direct south. Now, if you've a mind to go with 'em, you're welcome. I'll warrant you'll find enough in the way of bear hunting to satisfy you; perhaps a little Indian hunting to boot. For if the Banattees get hold of your horses, you'll have a long hunt before you find them again. Will you go?"
"Ay, right, gladly," replied Dick. "When do we start?"
"This afternoon."
Dick went off at once to his own part of the camp to replenish his powder horn and bullet pouch, and wipe out his rifle. That evening the party, under command of a Canadian named Pierre, set out for the Blue Hills. They numbered 21 men, and expected to be absent for 3 days, for they merely went to reconnoiter, not to trap. Neither Joe nor Henry were of this party, both having been out hunting when it was organized. But Crusoe and Charlie were, of course. Pierre, although a brave and trusty man, was of a sour, angry disposition, and not a favorite with Dick. But the latter resolved to enjoy himself, and disregard his sulky comrade. Being so well mounted, he not unfrequently shot far ahead of his companions, despite their warnings that he ran great risk by doing so. On one of these occasions he and Crusoe witnessed a very singular fight, which is worthy of record. Dick had felt a little wilder in spirit that morning than usual, and on coming to a pretty open plain, he gave the rein to Charlie with an "I do, mes comrades." He was out of sight in a few minutes. He rode on several miles in advance without checking speed, and then came to a wood where rapid motion was inconvenient. So he pulled up, and dismounting, tied Charlie to a tree, while he sauntered on a short way on foot. On coming to the edge of a small plain, he observed 2 large birds engaged in mortal conflict. Crusoe observed them too, and would soon have put an end to the fight had Dick not checked him. Creeping as close to the belligerents as possible, he found that one was a wild turkey cock, the other a white-headed eagle. These two stood with their heads down and all their feathers bristling for a moment. Then they dashed at each other and struck fiercely with their spurs as our domestic cocks do. But neither fell, and the fight was continued for about 5 minutes without apparent advantage on either side. Dick now observed that, from the uncertainty of its motions, the turkey cock was blind, a discovery which caused a throb of compunction to enter his breast for standing and looking on. So he ran forward. The eagle saw him instantly, and tried to fly away, but was unable from exhaustion. "At him, Crusoe!" cried Dick, whose sympathies all lay with the other bird. Crusoe went forward at a bound, and was met by a peck between the eyes that would have turned most dogs. But Crusoe only winked, and the next moment the eagle's career was ended. Dick found that the turkey cock was quite blind, the eagle having thrust out both its eyes. So in mercy he put an end to its sufferings. The fight had evidently been a long and severe one, for the grass all round the spot, for about 20 yards, was beaten to the ground, and covered with the blood and feathers of the fierce combatants. Meditating on the fight which he had just witnessed, Dick returned towards the spot where he had left Charlie, when he suddenly missed Crusoe from his side. "Hallo, Crusoe! Here, pup! Where are you?" he cried. The only answer to this was a sharp whizzing sound, and an arrow, passing close to his ear, quivered in a tree beyond. Almost at the same moment Crusoe's angry roar was followed by a shriek from someone in fear or agony. Cocking his rifle, the young hunter sprang through the bushes towards his horse, and was just in time to save a Banattee Indian from being strangled by the dog. It had evidently scented out this fellow, pinned him just as he was in the act of springing on the back of Charlie, for the halter was cut, and the savage lay on the ground close beside him. Dick called off the dog, and motioned to the Indian to rise, which he did so nimbly that it was quite evident he had sustained no injury beyond the laceration of his neck by Crusoe's teeth, and the surprise. He was a tall, strong Indian, for the tribe to which he belonged, so Dick proceeded to secure him at once. Pointing to his rifle and to the Indian's breast, to show what he might expect if he attempted to escape, Dick ordered Crusoe to keep him steady in that position. The dog planted himself in front of the savage, who began to tremble for his scalp, and gazed up in his face with a look which, to say the least of it, was the reverse of amiable, while Dick went towards his horse for the purpose of procuring a piece of cord to tie him with. The Indian naturally turned his head to see what was going to be done, but a peculiar gurgle in Crusoe's throat made him turn it round again very smartly, and he did not venture thereafter to move a muscle. In a few seconds Dick returned with a piece of leather and tied his hands behind his back. While this was being done, the Indian glanced several times at his bow, which lay a few feet away, where it had fallen when the dog had caught him, but Crusoe seemed to understand him, for he favoured him with such an additional display of teeth, and such a low, apparently distant, almost, we might say, subterranean rumble, that he resigned himself to his fate. His hands secured, a long line was attached to his neck with a running noose, so that if he ventured to run away, the attempt would effect its own cure by producing strangulation. The other end of this line was given to Crusoe, who, at the word of command, marched him off, while Dick mounted Charlie and brought up the rear. Great was the laughter and merriment when this apparition met the eyes of the trappers, but when they heard that he had attempted to shoot Dick, their ire was raised, and a court-martial was held on the spot. "Hang the reptile!" cried one. "Burn him!" shouted another. "No, no," said a third. "Don't imitate them villains. Don't be cruel. Let's shoot him." "Shoot him!" cried Pierre. "Oui, that is the thing. It's too good for Louis, mais it shall be doed." "Don't ye think, lads, it would be better to let the poor wretch off?" said Dick Varley. "He'd p'raps give a good account of us to his people." There was a universal shout of contempt at this mild proposal. Unfortunately, few of the men sent on this exploring expedition were imbued with the peacemaking spirit of their chief, and most of them seemed glad to have a chance of venting their hatred of the poor Indians on this unhappy wretch, who, although calm, looked sharply from one speaker to another, to gather hope, if possible, from the tones of their voices. Dick was resolved at the risk of a quarrel with